Carlos Alcaraz and Novak Djokovic just had an incredible match, and in this lesson, I'm going to show you how you can cover the court and crush the ball just like them. Ever notice how the best players in the world seem to kind of float across the surface of the court, and all their movement is super smooth and efficient? Watch Novak on the screen right now, and I don't want you to watch how he's hitting the ball. I don't even want you to notice necessarily how he's running to the ball or what stance he's using or anything like that. Just notice how once he recognizes where the ball is going and he's coming down from his split step, he's dynamically flowing his energy to the right or to the left. In other words, he's not coming down from his split step and then restarting his energy and his momentum towards the ball. It's happening in one fluid movement. Here's exactly what I mean by that. Novak is recovering from his previous shot right now, and at this moment, he's lifting up into a split step. We can tell that because his whole body is neutral facing towards his opponent. His stance, his feet are both neutral facing towards his opponent. The ball is getting hit right now by Carlos on the other side of the court, and instead of coming down from this neutral position right here, landing facing forwards in a ready position, and then saying, oh, it's a forehand, or oh, it's a backhand, and then starting to run in that direction. Watch how he seamlessly comes down and his left foot is going to pivot out to the left and his right foot is going to plant down in the court surface. And so he maintains his energy and his momentum. His body was in motion. He lifted neutrally to be able to move equally in any direction. But then once he identified where the ball was going, he seamlessly flowed and continued his body's energy and momentum. Now that you know what to watch for, watch Carlos do the same thing. And on each of these individual shots, you'll see him do the exact same pattern. Lift neutrally, identify where the ball is going, and then seamlessly flow his energy and momentum in the direction of the ball. Here he is recovering from a shot. Here's his split step right here, just like Novak. He's completely neutral. He could move in either direction. Once he identifies where the ball is going, this time it's going to be his left foot that plants, his right foot that pivots, and he's able to seamlessly flow his energy and momentum in the direction of the ball. It's important to note that sometimes players end up having to change direction. So here's a recovery where he's moving back towards the middle. Here's his split step right here. He's in the process of recovering, so his energy is going this way, but Novak is going to hit the ball that way. So instead of his momentum flowing in the direction he was already heading, watch how this time he's going to plant his right foot, pivot his left foot without both feet touching the ground, and then seamlessly push off and go into a running position back in the direction he just came from. Sadly, the vast majority of everyday tennis players like me and you, not only do they not have this kind of natural flow and smoothness and gracefulness, but they don't even split step at all. And listen carefully, this is most of you watching this video right now look like the player who's on the screen at this moment. This player, I just got back from Costa Rica working with a group of students. This is what it looks like to exchange with the rally with no split step at all. Notice, it's worth pointing out, this player is getting to a great ready position. So here's the ball getting hit on the other side of the court, and she's doing a good job as the ball gets hit of widening her stance, facing towards the incoming ball, getting her body and her feet pointed towards the person who's hitting the ball. So we've been told a million times to get into a ready position. We've also been told a million times to split step. Most of us are not doing it at all. So there's no chance of flowing and being graceful and smooth like our favorite players on TV. Now here's that same player after doing a couple training exercises, and I want you to watch how different this looks. She's not going to do the dynamic flow every single time, but you can see now consistently she is lifting off the court surface, and so she has some energy and momentum that she could if she times it perfectly, and I'll tell you what the perfect timing is in just a second. Now the door is open for her to start seamlessly and smoothly transitioning around the court. And look, she just did it. This is her first time ever practicing this. She's lifting off the court, recognizing the ball, pivoting the correct foot in the correct direction, and now she's starting to be able to harness this energy and momentum and flow seamlessly in the direction of the ball. This is how you can be a great athlete and cover much more court with, believe it or not, less energy, because we're using this momentum seamlessly to move towards the ball. The secret to doing this consistently is all about the timing. Carlos is in recovery right now, back towards the middle. He's going to lift in a split step right here. Here's key number one. He's lifting in his split step. I'm going to leave the video paused right here. I'm going to go over to Novak before the ball gets hit. This is the secret. We need to initially lift the court before our opponent or our partner hits the ball. The reason why this is important is we don't know where they're going to hit the ball. It could go right or left. And so we want to unweight ourselves in a neutral physical position before the ball gets hit so that we can then use that active kinetic energy after we know where the ball is going to come down and flow in whatever direction the ball is headed. Now I'm going to inch forward in the video. There's the hit. And at this moment, Carlos is still neutral. That's because it takes the human eyes and brain about 1/4 to 1/3 of a second to be able to physically react to information coming in. And so after the ball has been hit, then he points his right foot in the direction the ball is going and maintains his energy and momentum to be able to seamlessly flow in the direction of the ball. So if you want to move like the players on TV, the sequence is step 1, lift in a neutral position and stance before the ball gets hit. Step 2 is read the direction of the ball while you're in that neutral position up in the air. And then on the way down, pivot your outside foot in the direction of the ball so that you can flow in whatever direction the ball was headed. That's step 3. Hopefully, I don't need to say out loud that this is hard. It requires a tremendous amount of timing and precision, but when you nail it, it feels absolutely magical the way you can float around the court. By the way, it's worth pointing out, even players like Carlos and Novak don't nail this flow every single time. If I had to estimate, I've never done any like big actual study or like data on this, but if I had to guess, they're probably doing this flow about half the time. And the other half the time, they're not quite timing it perfectly to be able to preserve their energy and momentum on every single shot. If you want to learn how to use your body as powerfully as possible so you can hit your biggest forehands ever, make sure to go to forehandpower.com, where I'll show you how to add 15 miles per hour of pace to your forehand in just 15 minutes of practice by doing my favorite step-by-step drills that will show you exactly how to lead with the body, have the arm be loose and passive and follow behind, just like we're talking about here. And if you apply what you learn, you'll add a huge amount of power to your forehand in just 15 minutes of practice. There's no cost. You can get it absolutely free at forehandpower.com. Now let's talk about how they hit the ball so hard. It all has to do with using the biggest, strongest muscles in the body at the right time and in the right amount so that small parts of the body, like the arm and the hand and the wrist, can be really loose and relaxed and fluid. This is how it's possible to create easy power. First, let's talk about the forehand. As Novak gets set up to hit this forehand, I want you to notice how his upper body, his chest, has rotated and turned past where his hips are facing. His hips are facing 90 degrees relative to the baseline, and yet we can see most of the front of his chest as his racket starts to fall here because his upper body has turned or coiled or stretched past his lower body. This setup position right here creates a tremendous amount of stored energy with, again, the biggest, strongest parts of the body. What most players do this pretty well. I'm going to show you an example in a second, but they don't actually utilize the stored energy. The only way to fully utilize all this stored energy is to then unwind this stretch in this turn before the ball gets to the racket. And so here's what this looks like. Watch his hips and watch his chest. As the ball approaches the point of contact, they're going to unwind. His body leads his arm. This is called a lag position, meaning his arm, his hand, and his racket are trailing behind his unwinding body. Because it's his unwinding body that is the biggest, strongest, most important parts of generating racket head speed. And so ultimately, by the time he makes contact, his hips and his shoulders, his whole torso are going to be parallel to the baseline, facing fully towards the net by the time the ball touches the strings. It's really the arm and the hand's primary job to just simply be a conduit for all that big energy that gets created by coiling and uncoiling the body. And the arm and hand's primary purpose is just to deliver that force into the ball. Now here's Carlos getting set for a forehand in the middle of the court. Slightly different angle than Novak, so we're not going to see exactly the same things. But notice how similar of a position his upper and lower body is in. His hips are almost 90 degrees to the baseline. Not quite 90, but very close. Notice how his upper body has turned and stretched beyond his hips, and so he's storing a lot of power and force in the biggest, strongest parts of his body. Just like Novak, he's going to unwind with those big, strong parts of the body before his arm and hand start coming around towards the point of contact. So look at how his chest and his hips are starting to unwind now. His arm and his racket are trailing behind those big body parts. And by the time he hits the ball, just like Novak, we don't quite have exactly at contact. Here's a little after contact. Here's a little before contact. Look at how his whole torso has fully unwound and is facing towards the net before the ball touches his racket. Unfortunately, most everyday tennis players look something like this. There's lots of stored energy, so you can see the hips 90 degrees to the baseline. You can see the body turned as well. There isn't really any dynamic stretch or coil here, but everything is sideways, and that means there's plenty of energy if we unwind in time to be able to produce a tremendous amount of force into the point of contact. And as the ball gets closer and closer and closer, the big parts of the body aren't doing anything, but what is moving? Look at how the racket and her arm and her hand are already starting to come forwards. And so this is a complete reversal. The body hasn't done anything. The arm and the hand are swinging the racket forward to hit the ball. And so now we have, relatively speaking, very weak, unstable parts of the body doing most of the work. And this is what's very tricky about this. Before you cast any judgment here, this is the majority of you watching this video are doing some variation of what we're seeing here. She's going to hit the ball and then face forward with her body. So eventually, her body does turn, she does finish the stroke, but the order of operations is all mixed up. The arm and the hand are going first, then the hit happens, then the body goes forwards, and so none of that rotation of the body is actually even counting towards the energy into the ball. Now let's dive into how to hit the backhand as effortlessly and powerful as possible. Here's Novak getting prepared for a two-handed backhand, and we're going to see some very similar principles at work here compared to the forehand. His hips are right about 90 degrees to the baseline, and again, his chest has turned past his hips, so he's got some load, some stretch, some coil happening between his upper body and his lower body. And just like the forehand, it's a little bit different positions and a little bit different dynamic because both hands are now connected to the racket instead of just one. So there's not nearly as much of a lag effect with the arms or the hands trailing behind the body, but the body is still the most important part. So watch how before he touches the ball, his hips unwind, his chest unwinds, and at the time of contact, the benchmark I like to use is I like to see the belly button and the chest, kind of imagine like an arrow coming out of your belly button, an arrow coming out of the middle of your chest. I want to see those body parts facing the ball by the time the ball touches the strings. That indicates that the biggest, strongest parts of the body actively unwound before contact was made, which means we're going to have a big amount of energy and force going through the point of contact. Now let's check out Carlos as he gets ready for a backhand. He turns his hips, interestingly, a little bit further than Novak in preparation. His hips are a little bit past 90 degrees. As his chest turns past his hips, I'm going to go back and forth a couple times. Watch how as his chest turns, his hips start to create a little bit of forward wave of energy, which to me, I think probably to him internally, just feels like really accentuating that twist or that stretch between the upper body and lower body. Watch what I'm talking about. How his upper body turns and his hips start to rotate forwards, and then his upper body follows behind. Just like Novak and just like every other world-class two-handed backhand player, by the time he hits the ball, imagine that arrow coming out of his belly button, out of his chest. It's facing at the point of contact, and that's because he's unwound those big, strong parts of the body before the ball gets to the racket. I had a whole other third topic lined up for this video, but this video is already too long. I don't have time to get into it today. So if you'd like to learn about the different stances on the forehand and backhand that both Carlos and Novak use to be able to transition from neutral to defense to offense totally seamlessly, just leave a comment down below and let me know that you'd be interested in looking at an analysis of how they use those different stances in different situations. And remember to add 15 miles per hour to your forehand in just 15 minutes. Go to forehandpower.com and get the free training. Thank you so much for watching today. I hope this video was super helpful, and I'll talk to you again soon.